So welcome to another episode of Association Peeps and Cubicles Drinking Coffee. And today's flavor is a Dunkin' Signature Series, which is a dark roast. Not my cup of tea, but my counterpart is a much heavier coffee drinker, so had to upgrade for his liking. So great to have Mickey Moore with More Business Strategies with us today. And we're going to cover a very important topic to everybody, fundraising in tough times. And so I've got a great expert in Mickey being with us. Mickey's got a background, pretty wide variety of perspectives. I've come from financial management, banking background, and then has been CEO of several foundations, but also served as a volunteer board member for many organizations. So he sees things from both the staff and board member and volunteer perspective. So he's a phenomenal fundraiser. Definitely has got some great systems and best practices that good times and bad times that he's going to give us some good perspective. So we'll kind of dive right in and just hit a few salient points, hopefully, with a pretty diverse audience, I hope, in terms of our listeners. And so let's kind of start. I mean, you're kind of known as a very, I'd say eloquent subject matter expert on fundraising strategies in general. Mm-hmm. And, in this particular, pandemic, if you will, everything's turned upside down, if lack of a better term. So as it relates to just the general donor base, what are some of the key things that you've been advising some of your peers and clients, if you will, on kind of how they approach the strategies differently than kind of pre-COVID, if you will?
Sure, and thank you for letting me be here today and being a resource for you or whoever's listening. But for my clients from the get-go, I think the first thing we told them was don't retreat. It's not a time to withdraw. Continue to communicate, maybe over communicate. And I'll be honest, those with a more diverse revenue stream or outreach communication avenues have fared better, right? So really it was don't retreat. Let's talk about how your mission has improved, has expanded your services through COVID, right? Along with the protocols. So really subtlety with delivery, and then messaging with a little more care and compassion is something we really pushed to our clients. Because donors, you never know, right? They could be individuals, they could be business owners, they could be on boards, they could be decision makers, and until you pick up the phone and meet with them, you just don't know what they're going through. So again, it was more don't retreat, advance, reach out, have more conversations, ask more questions, but don't fall backwards, because when we get to the other side of this, I'd rather them to be a little more ahead of the game than behind it.
You mentioned obviously kind of more corporate donors or business contributors. In that sense, I mean, obviously whether it's a C3, C4, C6 organization, special events are generally a fairly large revenue source, and so if you looked at how to approach the kind of the corporate members differently, and just in terms of messaging and potentially payment plans or deferrals, kind of what's that process look like?
Yeah, hit it head on, right? So it is a partnership, and what I've told folks is reach out in your scripting, your case for support, your value proposition. Just be upfront and honest. And if I were to call you tomorrow, I would say, thank you for your support. We're talking about what's coming down the road. We value your input. We want to know how COVID may or may not have impacted you and your business. We want to tell you what we've been doing in our mission through COVID, and eventually come together with a plan for us to participate together in our upcoming special event. So you tell them that. That way they know there's no surprises, but you showed care and compassion, right? But you've also given the hint of we still have an event coming up. And then when you get there, ask the questions open and honestly. Adjusting the expectations around the event is one thing. And, everybody's talking about virtual events. Wonderful, but they still require time and energy and resources to put those on. But the main thing is I would not suggest that you just right away cancel and drop everything. Let's have those conversations with your stakeholders, because look, even during rough times, people still give, right? They still do. They may give a little less, but if you invite them in the conversation, I think you'll be better served by doing that.
Yeah, I mean, for either certainly individual donors or organizational donors, in terms of, I guess I'd say transparency, just because it's, like you said, there's everybody's kind of in the same boat in terms of, maybe making hard decisions on what they can spend or what their needs
Mhm.
are. So what's the level of transparency that you would provide individual or corporate donors as it relates to potentially, kind of the financial impact
Yeah,
upon the organization itself with revenue disruption? Where does that come into play and what level of detail is appropriate,
sure.
so it doesn't kind of work against you?
Well, in a recent article I wrote about revenue disruption, I really talked about your raving fans and your conversations you have to have with those types of donors. Different conversations than you would have with a prospect, right? Somebody that's never given to your organization. So, assuming there's a relationship established, I'm all in with transparency, right? I mean, if you're comfortable telling them what the expected ROI was or your gross revenues from the event, if this is one of your key donors, why not? Right? If at any time you would be more transparent during a difficult situation. So, yeah, I don't run from that because it is what it is. And as a donor myself, I value that, right? If you were to tell me very specifically where my monies were going and why it's needed, again, going back to case for support, I'm more likely to support you. Again, it may not be as much as it used to be during a hard time, but I will make it happen. So yeah, transparency is key.
Where do you bring in, board or committee volunteers into this discussion as far as engagement and outreach?
Yeah.
Would they be in a kind of a higher level of engagement than typically?
Yeah, and again, more board meetings right now, right, than ever before. Most nonprofits are meeting quarterly, some every other month, some monthly. But with virtual now, you can meet even more often. And I think most did that in March and April, maybe gone down a little bit now. But from a fundraising standpoint, they should be a consistent part of your proactive outreach all year long anyway, right? And as you know, when you have a pandemic or any kind of tough time, if you can pivot to other spokes on the fundraising wheel, great, right? But if they're not in place, you can't. And one that you should utilize all the time are your volunteers. In previous conversations you and I've had, we talked about retention, expansion, acquisition, and influence when it comes to development. So your board members provide a lot of influence. However, be cautious because there are risks that you take, right? You don't want to just throw them out there and let them come up with their own case for support to represent the organization. You want to provide some scripting. You want to provide some qualified list of prospects or donors. And you want to maybe we've created a referral form, right? Where they can either give you a few names, you give them a few names, but there's ways to put some structure and process around it so they don't feel uncomfortable, but then also you limit some of the risk that sometimes will happen.
I mean, you focused a little bit on the communications in terms of the frequency, especially with the board and other volunteers. What about the donor basis in terms of frequency of communication and potentially, I guess to say, although it's, to some extent you're looking at reduced budgets maybe in terms of your ability to spend money, but is this the right time to actually increase marketing budgets?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd say across all channels, you should increase your communication during the pandemic. Certainly there's cost involved there, right? But some of them are minimal. I mean, with e-blasts and emails and social media. But when you take a step back, big picture, relationship development from a connectivity and participation standpoint, it's all about a proactive process, right? So segmenting your donors and your prospects and building out those touch points all year long. As long as it's a mix of, you've got birthday cards, e-cards, social media, you've got face-to-face, you've got special events, and there's so many ways you can touch them throughout the year. The ultimate goal, Bennett, I think is important, is it's relational versus transactional, right? So if you have a special event, that's a transaction, but what are you doing between the event this year and next year? So that way, when these hiccups come in the market, whether it be a natural disaster, whether it be an economic downturn, they know you and they hear you often, so you're top of mind. So when you reach out to them during a difficult time, they're more likely to answer that call because they don't feel like you left them in the dark for 12 months. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah, and so Mickey, just in terms of, you talked about like the prospect base, if you will, what kind of factors would need to be in place, from your perspective, to reach out to that group of people where you didn't have an established business relationship? When is the timing going to be right to kind of broaden your net, if you will?
Yeah. It again, during tough times like this, I wouldn't suggest focusing on prospects, right? Because they're just, that's a whole nother relationship. But you have to acquire new business. And I'm not a proponent of cold calls. So you got to have a connection. And you know that, being in business so long as you have. So referrals, community approach. There's several ways that I coach our clients on getting more appointments and hopefully more business from prospects. But I'll go back to the structure and process. So the keys are working from a qualified prospect list. Instead of the shotgun approach, you just put anybody on a list, work from a list and provide some scripting. And ultimately, that referral, along with a value proposition that works, case for support in the nonprofit side, you got to utilize that structure and process because, again, you don't have the relationship. Back to your board members. I always look internal first, right? Start with your board members, start with your key donors, send them. I remember when I was at the bank, quarterly, I would send my short prospect list to probably 5 or 6 people that are on my speed dial as a banker. It was a lawyer, it was a realtor, it was a CPA, folks that had connections in the community. So on the nonprofit side, I would share it with my board members quarterly, and then our key donors. Hey, do you know any of these folks? Can you help me get my foot in the side door? So those are some of the approaches, but it should be calculated and qualified. Yeah.
So let's talk about just restructuring. In this sense, what I'm talking about, we've got a diverse group of listeners, some of which may be C3s, more the charitable organizations, C4s, more the social welfare, and then C6 is obviously primarily chambers or trade associations, professional societies. So let's maybe just talk about C6s just as an example. So some C6s obviously have a C3 subsidiary. Some of them might have for-profit subsidiary, but let's talk about C3s. And, so in this kind of environment, is this a time where a C6 organization may want to look at potentially the opportunity for different reasons to maybe launch a C3? And what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great time. When you have these type of situations come up, again, natural disasters, pandemics, whatever they may be, they can be good times to look within to see where you can make some changes, right? Regardless of whether you have a strategic plan officially or not, it's a good time to look at your strengths and weaknesses, opportunities, threats, or whatever else you want to call them. But that's certainly one, right? As I said previously, I'm a proponent of diverse revenue streams, and the more spokes on the fundraising wheel, the better. However, don't do them if you can't support them, right? If you don't have the resources for it, you got to walk down that path, whether it be the skill sets and the people or the systems in place. So just saying, yes, we're going to have a pledge society through a 501c3 is great, but you've got to set up the levels and the letters and the reminders and everything else for it to succeed. So I do think it's a good time to look within to see if maybe you shift some of those things or create new things. Yeah.
Very good. Great input. So I appreciate it very much, Ricky.
Thanks.
So fundraising in difficult times, let's continue that conversation just as it relates to, it's a team effort. So, you got, obviously, depending on the organization size, you've got staff, you've got committee volunteers, you've got board members. So, from revenue disruption point of view, how do you look at board governance and kind of your skill sets of your board members? What's that look like just in terms of for potentially launching new programs because the traditional ones are no longer relevant or doable anymore, or we've got to look at other areas to kind of diversify? What's that look like?
Yeah, that's a good question. When it comes to governance and things that we do with our clients, the first question I ask is, tell me about your board matrix, your board makeup, right? And we always suggest that you keep an updated matrix of all those demographics about your board. So everything from how long you've been on the board, age, industry, everything that's an easy identifier, so then you can see where the gap is, right? So in your organization, if you know your programs are going to be changing, or if you know your fundraising has been impacted in one way or another, well, then it should be identified and help you recruit to those gaps, right? So that's usually the first play. The second play, we talk about structure and process and how participatory your board members are in connectivity and participation in fundraising. And I know you've heard it before. Board members, some of them are scared to death because they think that means they got to ask people for money, and they don't want their friends to look at them and walk the other way when they come down the sidewalk. So you got to put them at ease through structure and process in order to change their behaviors. So you create participation forms, referral forms, you give them lists, you give them scripts. Because ultimately it's about their influence, right? It's not necessarily about them asking for the money. It's allowing you an entry to other people and other connections for you to eventually ask for the investment in your mission, right? So I've seen that help board members participate more. But at the end of the day, they are volunteers. You know, they have jobs and families and other things so you've got to manage those expectations too. And again, I'll circle back to governance. That's what's in the expectations piece. Yeah.
Very good. It's been a great episode, and we're grateful to have Mickey and his expertise to share with us, and hope that this has been helpful for all of our listeners out there. So thanks, and be well.